David Daniels is our guest artist tonight. He's the watercolor instructor for the Smithsonian Institution of Washington, D.C., and a former instructor at Montgomery College in Maryland. Dave teaches watercolor workshops throughout the world, and he also offers many virtual workshops, which you can learn about on his website, mrwatercolor.com. That's MRWATERCOLOR.com. Dave loves to capture the spirit of nature and interpret its beauty through his own personal vision. He enjoys experimenting with various materials and methods and finds watercolor to be a very versatile medium for doing that. He starts out many of his paintings using a masking agent and multiple washes to achieve a range of different effects in his work. At times, he adds pastels to strengthen the depth of color, and almost always paints in a large format, which allows him to exaggerate the subject matter. He strives to elevate the medium of watercolor by using innovative techniques, all the while preserving the natural beauty of its transparency. Tonight, Dave will demonstrate his unique style as he paints one of his iconic images, the lotus flower. And I will tell you that this video will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. I encourage you to check out Dave's website to learn more about his upcoming classes and workshops. Thank you all for attending, and I'll turn the mic over to Dave.
There I am. Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. And Deidre, I was going to tell you, you don't have to wait for me to come to a certain stopping point while I'm painting. You can ask me anytime. I just can't stop to read the comments is all.
Okay, gotcha.
When you ask me, so.
Okay, thanks.
Like I said, I'm delighted to be here for all of Zoom's shortcomings. It does have some benefits. I would not be able to invite all you into my studio this evening like I can tonight. So we have to pick and choose our battles, and sometimes some good can come out of the thing like Zoom. I am going to demonstrate backwards from the big painting that you see on the wall up here. I paint large, I paint impressionistic. I couldn't possibly try to do one of these for you in one evening. So I have deconstructed the steps that I take to do a painting like this. My botany background always plays into my paintings, and my botany background. So I'm going to take you from point A to point B. There'll be some detours along the way. I have another camera that I'll be painting where my painting is going to be. So what else do you need to know? I don't know, we can dive right in.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Let me show you some of my just typical paintings that I would do. That's not one. There we go. Remember when you see these that they all look the same size when they're on the screen? All of them are at least 3 full sheets of watercolor paper, sometimes 4. And I'm going to go through the process by which I work with these big sheets, because they're pretty massive, as you might guess. I do a lot of mixed media. All of my I use a lot of grounds from Golden and some modeling paste. I'm very much into experimenting, so anything goes as long as I get the painting that I want. This is the biggest painting I've ever done. I think that's about 6.5 feet. And then when you add the mat around, I had to be very careful that I could get it into my van. So I had to start measuring. But there's a lot of different techniques in here that I'm going to show you a little later on. Some of the modeling paste made by Golden, it's a product that dries kind of satiny, and it will give you texture like in these big rocks here. I apply it with a palette knife. And I do use lots of Frisket. Frisket is a masking agent, and I will be demonstrating that also. This is pretty typical of my work. Remember, this would be about 5.5 feet. And I occasionally do landscapes. I back away from the subject matter a little bit. A lot of my work is kind of finite work up close. I would like you to notice, I'm going to show you how I use stencils in my work. This area right in here is a stencil that I created. And I will show you how and this is a stencil, stencil, and stencil. My stencils are I create my own, but I also work for a company that makes stencils. I designed them to never be a standalone, like you would use on a wall or something like that. They, for me, are always just adding interest to the background. That's one of the questions I get asked all the time by my students is, what do you put in the background? Well, I kind of came up with this idea. It's not foolproof, but it does give you a place to start. It'll probably make more sense when you see me do it. Oh, here's another stencil that shows up better. And then I will clarify one thing just for the fun of it. The word stencil and mask have become interchangeable. I don't make stencils, I make masks, and I will show you the difference. They're the opposite of each other. So I set my masks into wet paint and hope that the paint runs underneath it, which is what most people really try to avoid when they're using stencils. So that was just to catch you up on the kind of things that I paint, the kind of imagery that I find exciting. I threw this in, I teach, Art 101 from day one. And what I try to instill in my students is that I think most of us have learned, if you had any kind of background in art, they have the elements of art and the principles of art. People can say them, people can recite them back, people get them mixed up. They don't know a principle from an element. And I've kind of cut through and got down to basics. I think I have had 3 huge aha moments in my life, and they all kind of happened at once. But when I learned that value was more important than anything else in my work, we think it's color. We think we're drawn to color, but we're actually drawn to value. And we think that the shapes is the next important thing for me. And then if I have color, I need a color plan. I don't want to just be a shotgun approach. And then the dominance and variety over here, I need a dominant color, a dominant shape, and a dominant value. So that's kind of my pared down version of the elements and principles of art. So this is the beginning of the painting that's over my shoulder that you can't see right now. At first glance, it might look like a pretty decent photograph, but if you look very closely at all, it doesn't make any sense at all. I used Photoshop and I merged these images together, but they don't really fit. I was not in any way trying to make a pretty photograph. I just wanted it to get the images in this format so that I could start to arrange them. So you can see there's a line here that makes no sense. There's some blue over here that makes no sense. But all I was interested in is getting the shapes. And I'll show you what I do with the shapes. I always put a piece of tracing paper over the photograph and trace out the big shapes. So this is a scan of a tracing. But when I get here, I can see if I want more shapes. I can see if I want less shapes. I can erase some shapes. but this is for me is the planning stage for all of my paintings. I try to have a variety of shapes, and when I get ready to put, well, first of all, this is the at this point is where I would transfer this image to watercolor paper, because it's uncomplicated at this point. And I'm going to show you what happens in a minute, because you won't be able to see those lines very well in a minute, I don't think. I put this in just as a quick, this is just a picture of a palette, somebody's color palette. But the reason I put it in was because of the importance of value. This is the same photograph, just in black and white. So I'm going to go back one. So when I do a value plan, it helps me figure out which colors I can get to be which value. There's only so many colors, and like the yellow ones will always appear lighter, up like that. So it helps me plan my colors when I do a value sketch. Now this is surprising to most people. I took the same tracing on the tracing paper and scribbled on the back of it and pressed it through on a piece of gray paper. And then I used black paint and white paint to do my value study. So I have a small example over here, but this helps me decide where my darks are going to go, where my lights are going to go. I'm going to sip up some water here. So this is the actual painting. And the beige marks, the beige lines are Triscuit. Triscuit is a masking agent. In theory, whatever you put down, you're saving out white paper at this point. You can paint right over the top of it, and then when it's dry, you pull it off and you have white. Well, that's where most people stop. I use many, many layers of Triscuit. So my work is almost like batik. I have another step coming up, but so I will add color at this point. And then in the next slide, I will add more Triscuit. Let's see where this goes. Yeah. And so I continue adding Triscuit and painting, adding Triscuit and painting. So when the painting is near completion, I can take off all of it. I can take off part of it. Some of it will revere white paper. Some of it will show you the color that's underneath when I put the Triscuit on. So it's very much like a batik process. That's just a further step. It's hard for you to know which of those Triscuits were put on the first time and the second time, because I didn't have two different colors of Triscuit. But there are about 2 layers there. A little more stages along the way.
Dave, the Frisket doesn't lift the paint when you take it off?
It lifts a little bit, but I paint accordingly.
Okay,
Put it on darker than I want it to be. It's not like night and day. It's not like an eraser. It's just when a Frisket comes in your hand, you can tell there's a little color in it.
okay.
Oh, that was the first question. I'm so excited. I have a 12-foot working table, and this is the piece sitting on the table. I just wanted you to see what I had to work with here in my studio. And that's, ta-da, that's the finished piece, just as you would see it on the wall in back of me.
Wow.
I threw this in because I've talked about stencils. This is actually, I'm using the word incorrectly. This is actually a mask, and the only reason it has color on it is because I've already used it in a painting, and I shaved crayon so that it would fall into the openings, and it also hit the mask as it was sitting there wet, and it just dissolved onto the stencil. And I liked it, so I didn't try to wash it off. I had the advantage of, I can make my own stencils, so I can cut these in half, or I can cut them in quarters. And I think I've cut this one in half to show you in a minute. If you're buying them at $15 a piece, you probably don't want to do that. But so this is where the crayon fell through the openings. And this mask, as you can see, that it didn't hit there. So if you're familiar with Yupo, these are all the same mask. I'm just using them on different paper.
Dave, we have a couple of questions in the chat. One is, what kind of frisket? Is it liquid or stick paper?
I know, yeah, I know that. I have it over here when I switch cameras. I use a product, well, I use so much that Frisket is quite expensive. Because it always actually balls up in the jar and all of that. But I use a product called Tear Mender, which is a glue. It's 100% latex. And you can buy it in Ace Hardware or online. For me, it's much, much cheaper and it works just as well. The fact that it's glue is surprising to a lot of people. If you lay a piece of paper on top of it, it'll glue them together. But if you just let it air dry, you can pull it off just like Frisket. There is a thing called Frisket paper that a lot of airbrush people use. It's kind of like contact paper. But I never got it to seal very well around the edges, so I just stick with my Frisket. I go through lots of bottles of it. It's a hazard of the painting process that I throw away a lot of bottles because they always get clogged up. I'm going to do this in real time, so I'm not going to, this is a minute video of me doing one of the stencils, but since I'm going to do that in real time, we won't have to watch that one. So there. I'm going to go over to my other camera. You can ask me a question before I get over there if you have questions.
Somebody was wondering, how do you spell the brand of that frisket?
Tear, I'll show you. As in tear, mender.
Tear Mender. Okay, thank you.
I don't know why they have to have that funny old man's face on there, but they do. Other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question, David. How do you put your watercolor papers together? How do you make one 6-foot piece?
Oh, excellent question. I don't. I buy a roll.
Oh, okay.
10 yards long and 48 inches wide. And it's a nightmare to unroll. It's been probably rolled in somebody's storeroom for a year, and when you get it, you gotta get it to go the other direction, and it's like a small army it takes to get the roll. But that's what I use.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before I switch over to the other camera? If you see a green thing floating by over here, I have a mobile over my head and it's a Calder. And every now and then this green disc is going to go sliding by. Don't want that. I do want that. So as simple as this is, I have a couple pieces of watercolor paper and I'm going to show you what I use on my big pieces. This is very small. I would never work this small, but all it takes is a piece of watercolor paper. The weight of the watercolor paper is kind of irrelevant because you're going to be gluing it to a piece of, this is aluminum. I get this from a factory in DC. It's made for outside signage. So it's acid free. It's very strong. It's lightweight. And so that's why I use it. And all you need is a piece of watercolor paper that is about a ½ inch bigger than the piece you're going to glue it to. Now, remember, this is not rocket science. I take this, which is soft gel. You know, many companies make soft gel. And I dilute it enough to get it to come out of this bottle. I make a circular pattern, roll it, and then you set your aluminum on it, and you set a lot of books on it overnight. And then what you end up with is this. Let me move this one out of the way. And it's fluid. And then you just take a mat knife and, cut at 45-degree angle. See, if I don't do all 4 of these tonight, I can use this board 3 more times as a demo. And you take off the edge, and then it's a perfectly straight edge. The advantage is no matter big or small, it's a wonderful surface to paint on. There's absolutely never any buckles at all. And the drying time is about twice as long as normal because the evaporation only comes off the top. There's nothing that goes in. So it takes quite a bit longer to dry, which I think is a good thing. And then I would finish this off with, when I'm all done with my painting, I get another piece of aluminum. This is a piece of aluminum that I painted with house paint. And this would be the small painting. And I just glue it right in the middle. So it looks like it has a mat. It looks like it has a mat, but it's really just space out here. And then there's one more step. I either varnish them with Golden makes a product. I did a print of it. This is archival varnish made by Golden, made specifically for this kind of work. And then you don't have to put it under glass or put it under anything. And the only reason I started doing this whole thing was that I don't like the reflection that's always on a watercolor from one window or a door or a light. So my watercolors don't have any reflections on them ever. And recently I've started using another, this is called a cold wax. And instead of varnishing them, well, I always spray them first, no matter what else. Because sometimes I use this wax. It's a paste wax like you would use on your car or your floors, but it's made for museum quality artwork. Put it on with a soft rag, and it really gives a very, very sophisticated matte finish, which is different than any other finish that I could get. So as uncomplicated as that is, I do like to do those steps so that you know what I'm talking about. Any questions? I can actually hear your questions if you have one.
Nothing in the chat right now, Dave, so.
Well, I have one
Um,
quick question. Dave, the archival varnish by Golden, it looked like it said gloss on there. Is that a gloss varnish?
It should always be gloss, the first one. Because if you use a matte or a satin, there's a chance that it will dull the dark colors. So every painting I do, I finish it with the Golden gloss acrylic or MSA. It's called MSA varnish. Because that holds the paint, sets the paint. It's not water-based, so it never runs. I was going to do this little demo with a stencil. This is the one that you saw in the painting, I think.
what do you cut the stencil or mask out of? Is it
Mylar.
Mylar? Okay.
And truth in advertising, I have a stencil machine that has software with it, and it's like a printer, but instead of putting in a piece of typing paper, you put in a piece of Mylar, and a blade comes down and cuts your design. So,
Oh, nice.
really sophisticated. I'll do just a little bit of this because I want you to see what happens. Actually, I can zoom in on that a little bit. Oh, this reminds me. Well, let me finish this thought. And then when you set this into it, I don't know if you could see, but the capillary action collects around that. This will probably be dry by the end of the demo, so I can show you. And then I squeeze other colors over it or through it. That didn't get very much. So we'll let that dry. Let me just hold this up so you can see what's happening. I did want to talk about, I know you guys are curious sometimes about the brands of stuff I use. The watercolors that I use are Daniel Smith or Golden. It's called QOR. And I do have some M Graham. Students always want me to print out a list of the colors that I have, and I'm glad to do it, and I do it. But what's ironical is that list is only good on the day that it's printed. Everything else in my life changes. Why would I use the same 24 colors for the rest of my life? So
Mhm.
I probably have 300, 400 tubes of paint. I have a couple workhorses that I probably wouldn't throw out, but I switch my colors all the time. It keeps me challenged when I know what color I want, and I don't have the paints that I usually use to make it. So I find it pretty challenging. Actually, just for fun, I'll show you. This is what this stencil looks like when it doesn't have paint on it. This is the commercial product. I should tell you the name of the place, stencilgirl.com, stencilgirlproducts.com. There's a whole slew of people who make stencils, and you can look up the artist by name, but it's by first name, not last name. I was also going to show you the gray paper. You saw the black and white study that I did. I just wanted to show you how this gray paper idea, I think, is pretty interesting. Oh, we'll do one that hasn't been painted on. So this is how I do my value studies. And what does a value study do? It tells me where my lights are, where my darks are. So I just wanted you to see that. So it's going to take me about 2 minutes. I need to clear this off so we can get to the painting that's underneath here. So bear with me for a second.
I have a couple of questions while you're
Sure.
playing with that. I know you're going fast to try. I just want to make sure I'm caught up.
Sure.
When you adhered the first smaller painting, you said that was aluminum you were adhering it to. Do you also do that with your large works?
Yes, the product that is common is it's called Alumalite. Alumalite. There's probably other products, but that's the one that I use. I can order it one day, and the company that I buy from delivers free the next day. So it's a pretty good deal.
And your value sketches that you do, you talked about the value sketch at the beginning. You start with a small one, or do you go right to the large one that transfers?
I start with a small one.
And then you go like I'll play with it on Photoshop and then
Yes.
go to enlarge it later.
Yep. That's right. I also have to have some clean water here.
And if some of you are noticing that Dave's screen is upside down, he said once he starts painting the piece he's doing, the orientation isn't going to make a difference. So just bear that in mind. I know when there was a printed paper there, you couldn't read it, but it won't matter for the painting.
No, for one reason, I've learned to paint, well, for two things. I'm so shape oriented that I don't even think of these as flowers, or I just think of them as shapes, so it really doesn't make any difference. If it's right side up or upside down. And the
Mhm.
other thing is, they're so big that I can't turn them around to paint on them. I have to walk around the table to paint on them, so. Actually, I'll start this one this way. So this is, actually, it's pretty close in size, not in size, but in scale to the painting in back of me. And I had to put this beige frisket on before we started because it has to be dry. That's one of the reasons these demos take a while. So I would, this is where I would start. And people sometimes ask me, well, where do you start? What's the first thing you start with? And the truth is, I always start with the thing I think I'll goof up on. Because why would I paint a whole painting and save that for the last, you know?
Mhm.
My palette is round. I'll show you it, even though it doesn't fit. And it's porcelain. This weighs about 10 pounds. So I can't travel with it. It's just too heavy.
Do you have a particular type of brush that you like to use?
Yeah, I don't want to tell you about my favorite brush that they don't make anymore. So I used to have one from Rosemary Brush Company in London that I loved, and they quit making it. My next favorite brush is a new one I just found from Princeton. It's
Mhm.
called Aqua Elite. It's half real hair and half synthetic, but it comes to such a beautiful point and it holds tons of water.
Mhm.
All of my brushes are quills instead of flats or rounds. I just learned to paint that way as well. So
Can you say the name of the brush again? What
it's
is it?
called the Princeton, is the company name, and it's called the Aqua Elite.
Thank you.
It's really has a beautiful, beautiful point.
Excellent.
Now I have to find my Kleenex. I always have to have a Kleenex in my hand. And as my friends would say, you know, I actually have a mantra that I say before I start painting. And my friends say, no, don't go all artsy fartsy, airy fairy on us here. But it has 6 phrases, which means something to me. I won't, there's no reason for you to know mine, except the first one. Whenever I start painting, I just say, I come to a complete stop. And that means I'm about ready to paint. I don't need to know what's for dinner. I don't need to know what mail came in the slot. I need to come to a complete stop. And then the last phrase is, there's no painting that's important right now except the one in front of me. So now you know all my secrets. I don't pre-wet any of my paper because they get wet enough. I also don't talk when I paint. So I put down a color and then I just add, I don't do any mixing on the palette. And remember, I'm going to show you about glazing in a second after some of this is dry. I also do not mind using white paint. I would not paint an object white, but I would put white paint in an area to make it push other paint around. And Frisket will always act as a barrier because I use so much water. The sections don't run into each other because Frisket is there stopping it, unless there's a hole in the Frisket line. This is one of my favorite blue colors. It's called Horizon Blue by Holbein.
Lynn asks if you apply the frisket with a brush or is it a
Yeah.
pointed
I have a squirt bottle.
squirt
So-
bottle?
This isn't filled with Frisket, but it's the same bottle that would be.
Okay.
And it will, I'm always leaning into wet Frisket, so all of my shirts have a line of Frisket across them because it will not wash out. It's rubber.
Ooh, that's a bright yellow.
Aurelian.
Dave, I don't know if you're aware or not, but your head covers the image a lot of the time.
Thanks. I have that. I have a lot of videos of the top of my head.
Yeah.
You can see the water is actually puddled on the surface here. I've used so much water.
Are you using a 140-pound roll then?
Yeah. Cold press.
Right. Yeah.
So I would probably move around a little bit now, just because I get tired of painting with one color.
So when you paint one of your very large ones,
Mhm.
do you work on a section at a time and complete that, or do you jump all over?
I jump
into
all over.
painting? Okay,
I think of these as like 30 small paintings, and eventually they all meet and create a piece of artwork.
mm-hmm.
Dave, what color is that?
But rich green gold.
It's beautiful.
I'm also a stickler for clean water, so I'm going to take a break here and go get a new thing of water. I see students painting with water that you couldn't get a clean color out of it if you had to. So, well, I get some water.
That green gold is probably a Daniel Smith.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I have that and I use it all the time. It really is a wonderful color.
Yeah. Well, I'm a brand ambassador for Daniel Smith. The trouble is, not the trouble. The good part is I'm also a brand ambassador for Golden. So depends on my demo, which brand I talk about or which brand I use. Golden was really good to me when I was trying to develop the gluing of the paper to aluminum. No one else, I've been doing that for 30 years. No one else was doing it. They wasn't sure it was archival, but they really worked with me to be able to do it. I also couldn't enter any of my paintings into shows because they weren't under glass and people didn't know what to do with them or what to call.
Oh,
But 30 years later, guess what? They're almost in every competition now.
David, is that yellow in the main part of the flower still aurigulin?
Mm-hmm.
It's gor-
Maybe I don't say it right. AR, I don't have my tube here, but I think it's pronounced Aurelian.
Okay.
What is the hanging apparatus that you put on the back of the aluminum? Or do they prefabricate something for you to?
No. I put them in a
Okay.
Nielsen frame. I do frame them.
Oh.
And so the frame has its own hardware.
Oh, you do the Nielsen. Okay, okay.
Um, Yeah, I'm not a stickler for, I mean, when I wet this area, I know that this is gonna run into that. But I also think in nature, those things would be blowing in the wind and touching each other, and I try to not put things in a vacuum. Make them look stilted. And this is white once again. Sometimes people ask, if you put red and green together, why don't you get brown? It's a really simple answer. I don't mix them around. I just put them down. I let them decide who's going to mix with what. If I noodled that, it would automatically turn to brown. Did a little bit just right then. So I let the water and the paint decide where the lines are going to meet and when they mix. So you get to look upside down for a minute. One of the other advantages I find of working on the alumina is that I use a lot of wedges when I want all the water to run one way. I just put a wedge under one end or over one end, and it's so solid that the whole thing tips.
Carrie is asking you, does a quill brush come to a better point than a round?
Probably not. I mean, there's really good round brushes that come to a point, but the round brushes don't hold nearly as much water or pigment. Um, this really holds tons and tons of pigment and water. The rounds just don't hold that much for me.
Barb is wondering if you're putting your brush in water before every stroke.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm usually blot it on a Kleenex too, to control the amount of water. I also think it's interesting when you watch somebody paint, you kind of question, why did he pick that color? Why is he doing that? If the painting was all done and not hanging on a wall, you would either walk up to it and enjoy it or not enjoy it, one or the other. But you probably wouldn't have a way to question every single stroke. So sometimes the strokes I'm making might not make sense, but in the overall painting at the end, I think they do.
So when you have your first coat of Frisket down, and then do you paint the whole thing let it dry, and then do your next round of frisket?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You're a very patient man.
I am. I usually spend a week and a half on each painting. I must admit, since I Zoom, I don't have time for my big paintings anymore. I don't mean time, space. Zoom has taken over my studio. Well, see, I'm calling this a small painting.
Right.
So everything does become really relative.
So is that a half sheet or full sheet you're working on right now?
I just have the dimensions because it's not any sheet, it was out of the roll. So I just got the size I wanted, and it's probably it's almost a full sheet this way, I think.
Okay. So roughly 22 to 30 inches that
Yeah.
way, width? Okay.
Do you find that frisket has to be removed within a certain period of time in terms of days or,
Well,
I've used frisket in the past and it seems to not lift well.
you're absolutely right. Every jar says something different on it. Most of them say remove within 48 hours. And what they're doing is trying to cover their behinds because they don't want people to get stuck with a chunk of frisket on their paper. I've left some on for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it didn't make any difference at all. And some I've left on for one day and I couldn't get it off. I never knew why. So I guess if you want to be really, because I said to the company, you mean if I don't finish my painting in one day, excuse me, I'm supposed to take the frisket off overnight and then reapply it the next morning in the same place? And their answer was yes. I thought, okay. There's see, can we still see that? Yeah, there's a big leaf over here. Where'd you go? I'm dyslexic and then have a camera be backwards. There we go. This is quinacridone burnt orange. It was just a discolored leaf that caught my eye.
We have a question here. As you're thinking about your value study, do you use certain colors for darks and certain colors for lights?
I do, but that's just the nature of the color. There are only so many colors that you could get to be on a scale of 1 to 10. If 10 was dark, there's only
Mhm.
so many colors that will go that dark. You
Right.
can always make a color lighter by adding water, but the darks are the tricky ones. Those are your blues and your dark blue, your phthalo blue and your carbazole purple. And so I am really conscious of that. Yes.
What green do you use for your darkest green?
Shadow green is called.
Okay.
I don't have any out right now. It's made by Daniel Smith. It's almost a black green.
Okay. And a question about your background, David. Do you have any past experience as a biologist or botanist that you think gave you a special advantage in your painting or
Yeah.
with values?
I don't know about the value part. Certainly my background, I take liberties with color and a lot of things, but my plants and animals will always be botanically correct, for one thing. Depending on what the way the leaves grow and things like that. But I'm not sure that answered that question though. Ask me again about my biology background.
Um, who is asking that question? Is that you, Lynn?
I just misunderstood the question, I think is all.
Lynn, do you want to unmute and ask that yourself?
Nope, that wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
We have a mystery question.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
the initials look like LM, but maybe there's another LM.
Lynn, did you take a class from me recently?
No, I
Oh,
didn't.
okay. Someone did.
I did. This is Lainey.
Rainy.
I took a class with you last spring.
Right. Hello.
And actually I asked you if you would do demos, so that's how I got you in touch with Deirdre.
There we go. You can see how wet these are. That's probably a little too wet, but I'll blot up a little bit of that. So I wish there was bigger secrets to what I do. I keep plodding along and eventually all of these plants grow into each other. And see, if this wasn't glued down completely with all of this water, it would just be one, even if you stretch your paper, it would still buckle using that.
Mhm.
And that's a color called Wisteria. Daniel Smith, it's a little opaque.
Did you mention the glue that you adhere to the aluminum with?
Yeah.
Or did I miss that?
No, it's a soft acrylic gel. Many companies make it. Soft gel. I had a picture of it here something. That's the one I used. Whoops, that's just a picture of it. And I dilute it enough to get
Oh,
it
okay.
in a squirt jar. Did you remind me of timing on what we're doing?
Yeah, it's 8:05,
Okay,
so another 25 minutes or so.
perfect. Yeah. Um, I'm just cleaning this board up because I wanted to show you another step. I wanted to talk about glazing. And I wanted to show you the stencil. So this is a little bit bigger than the one I was working on, but it's exactly the same picture. I'll back off a little bit so you can see it. Yeah. So this is hard to distinguish, but these, well, I can put on a little bit more. These lines are the frisket that's added on top of color, not
Okay.
on top of white paper. Those lines right there, here's some, here's one. So when you pull this off, you have to paint over it. Well, I will do that, but it probably won't be dry enough to pull off. So these edges will have a different color, but it won't be white. And there's like, these are on top of green paint. And they're not on top of white paper.
So you've already pulled off the frisket that was on the white on
No,
the,
there are
those.
2 layers there.
Okay.
This would be on the white. A lot of this is on the white, but this is on previous color.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if that dries fast enough to pull it off. Watercolor dries, much lighter. And that's one of the really nice things about varnishing the painting, is that it brings the colors back to what they were when they were wet.
Can you tell me, David, what color that red is?
That's Quinacridone Pink by Daniel Smith.
Quinacridone.
This was a mistake. My brush was dirty. It's the one pink, it's a blue red, of course. But it's my workhorse. I really like it when I'm doing flowers.
Thank you.
So all of these lines are biscuit on top of green paint. So
It looks like you're using a different brush now and much less water. Is that right?
yeah, as I get finished a little bit, I use a smaller brush. It's still a Princeton Elite. It's just a different size.
Okay.
See, I'll figure out which one of these is on top after it's dry. I guess I just figured it out.
A member says, even though you're painting that dark paint over the delicate colors, you can still see their shadows.
Yeah. And phthalo blue is also my go-to workhorse for a blue. So let me see where I set that stencil that I did for you. This is the stencil that I did for you. Oh, it pulled off. It's already gone. So this is the marks that stencil made that I just did for you. And that's what's in the corner of this painting over here. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, my stencils were never designed to be anything other than a kind of ambiguous background.
What advice would you give to a person who is trying this technique for the first time?
Go for it. No, maybe practice without images. Just put down a color, then put Frisket down, and then let it dry, and make marks, X's, O's. Not be worried about the finished product or whether it might look like something. One of my favorite quotes is from Turner, artist. He said, "Release yourself from the tyranny of realism." Wow, yeah. So the day I started to think painting in shapes rather than objects really made a difference.
I have a question about the Frisket dots. Did you put those in at random or?
I just throw them in. I always have the option of taking them off before. So I don't really worry about having too many. I think they add atmosphere. I think they add surprise. They are about in 99% of my work. It's just something I got used to doing.
Okay.
Helen's wondering if you paint any animals.
I used to have a parrot and I used to have a dog. I painted that, but just for my own pleasure. I don't usually do other people's or other animals. Insects, yes.
As part of floral?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Birds, lots of birds. I just did a goldfinch setting in a cardoon, which is a big old, looks like a, what's it look like? Looks like a, can't think, can't think of the word. Anyway.
And do you do any abstracts, non-representational?
Yeah, I do. I make a living selling, and people love to buy things when they know what they are. So non-representational things don't sell as well for me as representational things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look, I actually think of these kinds of things as non-representational paintings, and then all of a sudden, oh, I kept it in the shape of a leaf. So I think about it that way a lot.
Mhm.
So I don't have any big secrets left. I would continue. I don't always, you can see this area over here. That would be considered background. I don't wait to the very end to do that. Because it's all sectioned off, I can do it whenever I want. And curiously enough, students in my class, I ask them not to refer to anything as a background, because there is no background. There's just a shape meeting another shape. There's no depth in this painting. It's an illusion that something is in front of something else. So the day I realized that everything is flat, nothing goes behind anything on this painting. It's just, you can draw it to look like it does, but it doesn't. So that was a big breakthrough for me too. So my students always just refer to, oh, this shape behind that flower rather than the background. So what else can I answer for you?
A question here, or just a comment.
Mhm.
A member says that your painting style reminds her of, or him, of Shirley Trevena of Great Britain.
Oh, God, what a compliment. Thank you. I love her so much. I also have a hero in Joseph Raphael, the big guy, the guy that does the big floral paintings. And me again. I can switch back if you guys want to see it again, but if I was going to talk to you in person, I was going to talk to you in person. I
So
love.
how did you, what journey did you take to arrive at this particular style?
A long time.
Yeah.
I didn't have a big ta-da. It's just my botany background. Well, very short story. I didn't switch until my senior year. And one of my classes, I was supposed to be collecting wildflowers and pressing them, turning them in. I didn't do any of that. The night before the project was due, I sat down and painted 12 little watercolors of these plants that I was supposed to be collecting. My instructor thought it was so unique. He thought I'd worked for months on it. So I thought, wow, I can paint these instead of go out and pick them. And that was kind of the turning point, actually.
And so you didn't you didn't go through art school to begin with. You went.
Oh, no, I turned to art in my last year of college. I also taught, so I was
Okay.
at a teacher college, and I taught for 15 years. But I taught art to kindergartners, so, and they're fun.
So did you to develop this technique, did you have a role model in that, or did you take a class from someone, or did you just invent it?
I just love the idea of masking out and painting over, masking out. I didn't know about batik, and I had done some batik, but I didn't make the real connection for a while. But it really is batik. Instead of paint, they had dyes and fabric, and I just used frisket and paint.
I think we had a demo by a Minnesota artist. Maybe one of the members remembers. I think his name was Daniel Weimer. And he does the shoreline of Lake Superior a lot.
Oh,
And he uses a technique with masking, and he uses both watercolor and acrylics. So he'll do the watercolor, then mask, and then do acrylic over it. It is it's also a very fascinating technique to see.
Yeah, I do pastels occasionally. I do gouache sometimes. I don't try to fix something with gouache. I plan it ahead that I'm going to be using a gouache. Most people use it just as a fixer. And I think it often looks like, oh, I'm trying to fix this, and draws your attention to it. Anyway, before we go, let me give you a commercial for, I have a workshop, 8-week workshop coming up starting in March for 8 weeks. And if you go to my website, I also doing a workshop in Connecticut, and I'm doing in 2025, I'm doing one in France. So all that information is on my website. Or if you have
Okay.
if you have questions that you didn't get to ask me tonight, just send me an email. I'll be glad to answer.
A member is asking, can you talk about your connection to the Smithsonian and the work you do there?
A lot of people don't realize that the Smithsonian has almost like a school. It's called the Associates Program, and they have a catalog that they publish where they do travel to all over the world. They have art, they have photography, they have quilting, they have speeches on Renaissance painting. It's just this conglomerate of anything that you would find in the Smithsonian. They also have a class that you can take connected to it. They give art trips around the museums, bus trips around the Capitol and things like that. It's really, some of them are 1 day long, some are half a day long, some of them are 8 weeks long. Just a variety of stuff. I taught down there for 30 years. It never got old. It was just wonderful to walk between the Capitol and the monuments, to walk to work.
Mm-hmm. At this point, if members would like to unmute and ask their own questions, that would be great if we had a little conversation here. So anyone who has a question about David's work or his technique, just unmute and ask your own questions.
I can take you back to.
Someone's got in here, how do you like Yupo?
I have a love-hate relationship with Yupo. I think most people do. I do. I like the challenge of it. I can't glue it to my aluminum very well because it's just, there's nothing, it has no body, has no tooth. But I have done a couple of paintings on Yupo just recently that I really liked. You have to have a mindset that you have to become friends with Yupo. You're not going to tame it. If you've used it, you know what I'm talking about. But I like it.
Mary
That
asked,
was what I was going to ask you, was whether it glues to aluminum well, because I've been using quite a bit of UPO lately.
It doesn't glue very
Trying
well.
Yeah.
I've tried in it. I've had a couple successes, but more failures, and I just can't take a chance on it anymore.
Mary asked, do you ever use aqua board or gesso board?
I have, but since I do this, there's really no advantage. Those commercial products are almost prohibitive in the size I would use. Anything that has the word art written on it as a product, it's going to be 5 times more expensive than anything else. So I have used them and they're fine, but I just like making my own size. I'm a real stickler for not sticking to traditional 22 by 30 sizes. So there's nothing wrong with them. I like them. This just works better for me.
Someone asked, can you zoom out so we can see your setup at the side with your water, paints, and brushes?
I don't think I can. Well, I can if I move this. Strangely enough, I always have 3 watered bowls. And if you'll notice, well, you can't see them, they're dirty. Whenever I travel, I try to find 1 bowl to bring home. So this one's from Africa and these 2 are from Italy. I love searching for the perfect water bowl.
Great idea.
Mom Gallagher or Mom Sell.
Lynn is asking, can you talk about the market for your super large paintings?
No, no, I do cut out my market a lot, especially for people my age, who are moving to retirement homes and things like that. It's not so much that they wouldn't buy the art, that most people just don't have a place for it. And I started to paint smaller. But I have found out that people who want a big piece of art usually find a place for it if they really, really want it. So depends on how bad you want it. I don't do galleries. I sell by word of mouth and clientele, and I'm having a show at NIH in a couple months, National Institutes of Health. I just work really hard at selling my work, and you know, when I do go out through a gallery, they take 60% now or something like that. But there's a market out there for good art.
Any other questions from the audience?
Is the paint, are the different paint colors in your palette, are they pretty fresh or like squeezed out from tubes, or is it you start out with the paint is really still really hard?
No, these were all, I paint so often that my paints never have a chance to really get dried up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they look really fresh.
Yeah, and if they do get dried up, I usually just add a drop of watercolor medium on top of them, which is what watercolor is made out of, and a drop of water, and they constitute overnight to be fine again.
Linda says gorgeous paintings.
That's the comment I like.
Yeah.
That's not a question.
Well, I think watching you mix the colors on the page really makes me want to go try that again. I think somehow different teachers do it a different way.
Oh,
And
sure.
seeing it mix on the page, there's nothing like it. It brings such a fresh sense to the painting.
The colors are just amazing to
Yeah.
me.
Thank you. Most of that is because they're mixed on the page and not on the palette.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, my workstation got a little junky, but you could still see the paint. I mean, I really like how things happen here. You know, I would purposely leave this V shape here to look like a part of the leaf. You know, that's all glazing, one color over another color after the paint is dry. And this blossom that's going to be created here, I think that's perfectly natural that should happen. I try not to make watercolor do things that it doesn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to remove any of your frisket now? Is it dry enough?
We'll
Just
see.
to show us a
Sure,
section.
So there's not going to be a day and night difference here, but let me zoom. Let me think.
Yeah, you can see it. Yeah.
I will zoom in on it. So you can see it's coming off right there. See that line?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And then it connected to another one I didn't even know it was connected to. Once you start pulling, there.
You zoomed all the way in.
Oh, did I? Yeah, sure did. This one might show up a little bit. There we go.
Now that white one was from the first pool, correct?
Yeah,
That
all
one
of these.
between, yeah. They're already off then.
Yep.
Does give it a nice variety.
Yeah.
So that's a real big shape that's left there that you don't call the background. How will you,
This one?
yes, how will you handle that?
I'll show you.
Good.
See it over my shoulder? Can you see it?
Yeah.
I can give you a better picture of that. So this was negative. This leaf shows up because I painted dark around it. The rest are all positive shapes.
So that was like a Mylar frisket, almost like an airbrush painter would do, paint around the
Yeah.
one in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could have saved it out, but I just painted dark around it to make it show up.
Any other questions? Well,
I just one question.
yeah,
Do you do the negative painting after you take the frisket off the flowers, or is the frisket still on there?
Both ways.
Oh, okay.
It's timing. I do it both ways. I guess that's
Okay.
the short answer.
Have you ever worked with airbrush? Curiously,
I have
I just
one.
was curious.
I have used it, but I spend most of my time trying to unclog it or something. Seems like it's never just pick it up and use it. But
It is more mechanical than just using a brush and painting.
my
with it.
alternative is I have 10 little spray bottles over there, pumps, that all have a different color in them. And they also get clogged up, but it's a lot easier to unclog it than that silly machine.
I hear you. Yeah.
you know, looking at your
Been there,
painting,
done that.
what happens for me looking at it is the lotus flowers are so transparent compared to the other green and blue and yellow shapes that are around it. They just glow.
They glow because of that very reason.
Yeah,
And they also glow because they're complements of each other.
Right.
really, really beautiful. Well, David, thank you so much. I'd like our members to unmute and let's give David a round of applause for
Thank
showing
you.
us his wonderful technique and
Right,
his
thank you.
style. Thank you very much.
Thank you.